Welcome everyone to the Careers in Aging Research Careers Panel discussion. I'm confident that you'll enjoy our time together today, learning from our GSA leaders. Before I begin, I want to just share briefly what our objective is for today, and really it's to kick off our first of what will be quarterly panel discussions focused on careers in aging. The leadership and planning efforts that led up to today's panel discussion is brought to you by a team of colleagues from the AGHE group's advancement working group, to which I chair. And quite honestly, because of the leadership and guidance from the AGHE chair, Dr. Dana Bradley, who charged our working group with thinking through GSA member engagement, we're happy to be here today. Also, none of this would have happened without the support of GSA staff, and I am particularly thankful to the leadership and guidance that Gina Schoen provided. So thank you so much, Gina, and thank you to my other AGHE advancement committee members. One particular note, this is all really part of our Careers in Aging Week, and March 26th to April 1st, 2023 is Careers in Aging Week. I know the GSA working group that's focused on this stuff we just got started last week. We're really excited to bring you some new useful tools and initiatives, and just wanting to let you all know that the date is set, so mark your calendars. A couple other brief announcements. I think you all know next week is GSA's annual scientific meeting in Indianapolis. I hope to see all of you there. While you're there, I hope that you consider attending your member group's luncheon to celebrate award recipients and the newest fellows. There are also interest groups that are still taking place during the GSA annual scientific meeting, so don't forget to check out the meeting schedule before you leave so you can fit the interest group meetings in. And then lastly, in the spirit of our annual meeting and annual giving, please consider donating to your member group's fundraising initiatives. Notice that I put member groups underlined and bolded because under GSA's relatively new structure, as a member of GSA, you can have a primary and secondary group affiliation. So if you're not certain if you have one or two member group affiliations, you can certainly reach out to Gina or any of the GSA staff to take a deeper look. And if you want to make sure you've got two, GSA staff can help guide you. And then lastly, something to keep on your radar, to keep looking at GSA Connect. Sometime the end of December, early January, you'll find a Careers in Aging Week RFP, which will focus on supporting university initiatives and events in the spirit of Careers in Aging Week on your campuses. So take a look. There'll be more information to follow. And if you have any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I've provided my email in this slide, but also I will put that in the chat here in a second. So with that, I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists and welcome 4 esteemed GSA colleagues representing 4 member groups. I have their pictures on the slide here, and then shortly they'll be ready to speak to all of you. But your top left of your slide, this is Dr. Rozalyn Anderson. She's the vice chair of the biological sciences section. Below Dr. Anderson is Dr. Shannon Jarrott, chair of behavioral and social sciences section. Then in the middle of our slide, Dr. Deborah Waldrop, chair of social research, policy and practice section. And then last but not least, Dr. Dana Bradley, chair of the Academy for Gerontology in Higher Education. I did want to note that Dr. Christine Mueller, chair of health sciences section, and Dr. Danielle Waldron, chair of Emerging Scholar and professional organization, had a conflict with today's meeting, and could not be with us. But I know that they are here and certainly would welcome any of you reaching out to them to ask them about their research careers. So I'm going to stop sharing my slide now so that you can see our panelists. And before we begin, if you do have any questions that come up for you, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll monitor the chat, and when appropriate, go ahead and ask those questions. If you feel comfortable at the appropriate time, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask those questions, and we'll just have a nice dialogue today. I did prepare a series of questions, and my panelists all know those questions, but what I'm going to have them start is introduce themselves, tell us what university, place of business, organization you're working at, what your title is, and then just briefly tell us your current program of research. And after all 4 panelists have done that, I'll then move on to my next question. So I'm going to start with Dr. Anderson.
Hi, everybody. So I'm based at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I've been there for quite some years. Actually went there for a second postdoc and ended up staying. It's just as well we bought our house. We're still in the same old junky place that we were when I came here first. So my area of research is biology of aging, in particular looking at caloric restriction. We work, it's all lab-based, or some of it's dry work, which is computer-based, but we have, monkeys and mice and cultured cells. We've dabbled a little bit in some human stuff, but mostly looking at biomarkers and things. But it's biology of aging, so cell biology, molecular profiling, and the idea is to try and uncover what creates disease vulnerability across a spectrum of diseases as a function of age, and then learn more about what makes those diseases tick and how we might be able to target them either individually or collectively by targeting aging. So that's my gig.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Dr. Jarrott.
Hi, I'm Shannon Jarrott. I'm a professor of social work at Ohio State University and have been so for about 7 years. Brought me to Ohio, and I'm particularly interested in studying the methodology and the practices that support positive outcomes of intergenerational contact. I'm really interested in how they can support more people entering into work with older adults, thus the careers in aging match, and interested in how they can help future older adults' health by giving young people positive ideas and expectations so they can prepare for a good old age. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Waldrop.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's really nice to see so many people on screen. My name is Deborah Waldrop. I'm a professor emeritus at the University at Buffalo School of Social Work. What's important about that is I am first and foremost always have been a social worker, and I came to my research agenda with 20 years of practice in healthcare, during which time I saw people at the end of life making really tough decisions with their families between bad and worse options. And I was determined along the way that I wanted to be a researcher who could make a difference in the ways that we listen to and care for people who are nearing the end of life and their families. So my most recent project it's all evolved around decision making in serious illness and at the end of life. And my most recent project has been with older dialysis patients and looking really at disease-specific advanced care planning tools. So that's my theme. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bradley.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where everyone is. Such a delight. I'm Dana Bradley. I'm at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and I'm a professor of social gerontology and computer science, which is an odd combination because I'm a historian by training. But I'm a dean, but it's really an and. And so most of my research really has evolved over years related to policies, programs, services around caregiving and older persons, right? So I'm a historian. My love is spending time in archives, and I'm blessed to have been able to do that in New Zealand over a number of years, looking at the historical trajectory of immigrants who were coming in from England and Scotland to New Zealand in the 1850s and 60s to answer the question, what did they do with their old people, right? So that question is something like, what did we do with, how do we care for, how do we support that intergenerational, kind of picking on what Dr. Jarrott said, the intergenerational side of what we do in so many lives. And so currently, so that's a bunch of projects. But one of the things I'm most excited about right now is our beta study on students as caregivers. And it's part of our work in age-friendly universities and age inclusivity, where we know that, so not all of us on the call, but I'm looking at our speakers, we're at universities, and our students, many of them are caregivers. Do they define as caregivers? Do they think of it themselves as that? And then what does that mean for university life, much less for their own caregiving experience? So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bradley. I'm going to start with Dr. Jarrott, and I'm going to ask all of our panelists, but start with Dr. Jarrott. How have your research interests changed or remained the same over your career? And were there any pivotal points that might have taken you to a different direction or solidified that I have to just stay the course?
Thanks. So I have been interested in this type of relationship between older and younger people and non-adjacent generations for a really very long time. I was actually even writing about it in my college application essays. And going to school, I came to appreciate that while my relationship with my grandmother might have inspired this interest, I was curious about providing this kind of opportunity and the potential benefits for young and old people who might not have close intergenerational family relationships. And I had my first career job. It was at Virginia Tech. This is where I met Dr. Fruhauf. She was my first doctoral advisee, for full disclosure. And I was responsible for directing research at an adult day services. And so I went from doing quasi-experimental survey research to doing applied practical research in a lab setting or in a realistic lab setting. And that was like a dream. And we spent all this time concentrating on what should the programming be for getting these children and older adults together. It was really exciting that there was a child development center right next to the adult day. And I remember the day came and I saw these teachers backing up to the wall, like they were in the adult day service, and they were not prepared for what to expect from adult day services participants, many of whom had some type of dementia. And that was a light bulb moment that I really needed to pay attention to the things going on and leading up to when the younger and older people come together, if I was hoping to achieve any kind of positive outcomes. And that's really a path I've been on for a very long period of time. And I've been really glad to start thinking about intergenerational, almost like a methodology to say, what are the needs and the resources in your community? I have an approach for that. I have some ideas about how you could respond to it. So for me, that's been really fun to take this value for a strengths-based approach to our young and old people together and saying, well, what do you need to work on? Let's see if an intergenerational strategy is a good way to go. I think I have some ideas for that. So that's kind of where I am today. So I've been able to apply that in Montessori-based programming, in healthy food access programming. We're applying it right now in kinship care settings and working with young people who might be in foster care to support resilience build and life skill building. So who knows what'll be next?
Great.
How's that to get us started?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Waldrop, we'll go to you next.
Thanks. So I would have to say that there was a pivotal moment for me in my doctoral program when I was taking my first course in aging, and we were reading Meredith Minkler's book on grandparents as caregivers. And I remember reading that book, and my doctoral advisor said, this is a perfect example of a dissertation. And she had done interviews with grandmothers in particular who were raising their grandchildren, especially in relation to the crack and cocaine epidemic back in the 90s. And I remember thinking, you can do research that way? Oh my, because I had spent, as I said earlier, much time at the bedsides of people who were trying to make decisions. And I learned from their own stories what it was that they needed the most. And so I could then apply that to my desire to make a difference in terms of the ways that people face the end of life. And so I had set about on my course of trying to establish ways to do community-based research. And I was very fortunate when I came to Buffalo to be welcomed by Hospice Buffalo. And many of my colleagues who do end-of-life research around the country have looked at me with envy and said, I can't get access to a hospice population because hospices are so protective. I was very fortunate to have collaborated with them over the 23 years I've been at UB, and that has made such a difference. And I've been able to establish my research as a community-based paradigm for the whole time that I've been here. And I've been very fortunate to have had collaboration with our local safety net hospital, Erie County Medical Center, with many, many community-based organizations. And so that's been really formative for me. And it's something that I would say is harder because it means relationship building and relationship, taking good care of those relationships. But in the end, it's been so valuable, and it's allowed me to ask questions that really can only be answered by the person who's living that experience. And so I'm really thankful for that path. And I urge others to consider getting inside of the lived experience, because I think it's a really valuable way to answer the research questions that you want to. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Waldrop. Dr. Bradley.
All right. I was trying to think of but was there a moment? Okay, so I'm still in graduate school, but I'm out in California. I went to Carnegie Mellon, so I'm Pittsburgh, right? So, but I go out west to California, and I end up in like an internship thingy. And Willie Brown was the Speaker of the California Assembly. So he was very, it was a time in California. And I was doing applied policy work. That was what my dissertation was, history and applied decision theory, something like that. But so it was not professor, right? It was just, he was Willie. And he said to me, Dana, you could do anything you want if you can get someone to pay for it. That's what I told my kids when they were looking at like high school, college stuff. I said, yeah, I don't care what you do, just someone else has to pay for it. The reason I say that was important was at the time I knew I wanted to go into research that had an immediate outcome for people who were aging. All right. And so that moment allowed me to think about my research agenda in ways that it wasn't just about me. It was about the other, like, who were the other people in the room? And they could be, and now when we think about doing community-based research, or we think about, the stakeholders, right? Not just who are good informants, but who's going to use to benefit, to be part of the research process that we do. And so I didn't realize it till actually Dr. Fruhauf asked, I could see these questions that were sent to me, but I was like, wow, Speaker of the House, he was the one who set me on this pathway. And so that pivotal moment in my research was really thinking about how to make the pie bigger. And so again, selfishly, I go look at the archives, right? These letters and diaries, and I could go on about that. But that's just part of my research agenda. The things that have been the most interesting and valuable have been when I meet with a group of elders to ask what they think are important questions. How do I involve people in that research process? And I don't think I would have done that. That was not my training in my doctoral program. I wouldn't have done that had someone not kind of, kicked me out of the nest, if you will, right? And gave me that inclination and that courage. And that's something that I practice today. Here I am at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. We joke about being the nerd school, but most of my collaborators, of course, many in gerontology at University of Maryland, Baltimore, but some of my deepest colleagues are in computer science and information science. And there, the richness of our discussions, when I have a co-PI or a PI who has this technology idea, right? Just this really cool stuff. And I say, that sounds great. Have you talked to older people about this? And the person, why would I do that? The science is good. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it is. But let's get together. And you could think of it as a focus group. You could think of it as an informant panel. We have lots of different names for it. But the magic that happens when you get this group of older persons, that we're blessed here in the Baltimore, we call it the DMV, but the district, Maryland and Virginia, the area, to have so many potential research pools to bring into our engaged research, in discussions, in helping to formulate not just the data gathering, but the research question. And I just get, I mean, I get a thrill because I see my collaborators who've never thought about doing research this way going, oh, this is a lot of work. This is a lot of fun, right? And you can see that. And I would never have done things that way had someone not essentially kicked me out of the nest years ago. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Anderson, how have your research interests changed or remained the same?
I think, can I just take a short poll here? Is anyone here in biology of aging? Does anyone do bench research?
See if I can see.
Raise hand function? No. Okay. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to add because the track is so different.
So just know that we're recording this though, Dr. Anderson. So we hope to put this on the GSA.
Okay, so then maybe it will go broader, but
Yes.
well, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just different. So most of the time when you're training in the biological sciences, you're at the bench and you're doing experiments trying to understand, how cells work, how organisms work, how aging works. And, you don't do it on the basis that, a person is going to benefit in the next short term. That's not what it's about. It's about discovery of fundamental mechanisms. So most of the time in your career, you're making decisions about whether you will change field or change organism, change geographical location. What are the most important questions to you? What techniques are you going to need to be able to ask those questions? So the guiding elements are not the same. And some of the more critical things that people will face going through their careers, am I going to move from this city to another one and take myself, my family, my dog, whatever, uproot and go and take on a new spot? And there's this risk balance assessment. And I suppose the most important thing I would say is, if you think that the science is engaging and it matches what you want to do, go for it, because there's no decision that you can make that cannot be undone. And so you go somewhere, maybe it's not what you thought it was, or maybe it's precisely what you thought it was. Maybe it's great and opens up new horizons along the lines of what you had in mind, but maybe it's not what you thought, but it opens up new horizons for you. So at each point in your career, you have decisions to make. And I think one of the things I would like to communicate to people who are at those different pivotal stages now, whether it's grad school to postdoc to scientist or faculty, is just grab what you find most interesting and find a way to do that. And that will depend on where it is, who else is there, what support system you're going to have when you get there. But just go for it, because so many of us on the call, especially the older ones, my age and older, we look like we have a narrative that we knew in utero how this was all going to work. We didn't. And often the time you're in the path and it makes sense after the fact. But what most of us have in common is that we went for something we felt passionate about. And I really mean it. Sometimes it doesn't work. And as one door closes, another one opens up. So if you stay engaged and follow the work that is meaningful to you, and then you just, be tenacious. But most importantly is this idea that everything looks like so put together. And then I went here, and then I was there, and then I was here, and then I was there. Amazingly, this happened. It looks like a built story, like a script for a movie. It's not when you're in it. So each thing adds, and then in hindsight, the story comes together. And I'd say the thing is, what's in common across all of the stories is that people followed something that they felt they really wanted to learn more about, to engage in, to be a contributor to, or if it doesn't exist yet, to build. So they're driven by the passion, and it only looks like a complete narrative in hindsight. At the time you're going, ooh, will I go here? Will I stay here? Will I take this on? Why isn't this being done? Maybe I'll do it. And so I guess, so there are lots of moments at each stage, career stage. You're balancing what you want to learn, what you will contribute, and the overall direction you want to go. But, you know, it should be a time of adventure. Each transition point is an opportunity. You know, and so anyone who's feeling nervous about these things, please don't. You know, this is a chance to just jump right in. And don't be afraid by people who look like they have it all sewn up. They didn't while they were doing it. It only looks that way now. I'm speaking for myself in particular.
I love that piece. I think as you were getting ready to say it, I wrote down on my notes here, passion. And I think so much of what I've heard from all of you today is that you're passionate about something, right? And it drove you. It reminds me of a moment I had in my career where I was told I shouldn't study what I'm studying because it'll never get funded. And I should totally pick a different area of research. And I was like, okay. And I kept doing it. And, you know, lo and behold, that area of work has been federally funded and continues to grow. So I think that's such an important piece that you add, Dr. Anderson. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to just also note that there's been comments in the chat saying, no, I am influenced by biology in my research, particularly ecological social development from Joanne Montepar. Thank you. And then from Christine, who's really interested in neuropsychological research. So I think we are having a great conversation and clearly adding and touching on number of different interests. But as I think you've all said, right, like there are lessons that we've all learned when we've conducted our research in aging. And so I'm wondering, I'm going to start with Dr. Waldrop this time. If you could pinpoint just like one lesson, one lesson learned in the context of conducting research in aging, what would that be that you would want to share with everybody?
I think I just want to pick up on the last comments, which is that the work we do is long and sometimes very difficult. And there sometimes can be lots of periods of time with and a thankless kind of time when you feel no gratification for what you're doing. And so my point is really that pick something that you have passion about, pick something that you enjoy, that brings you great joy and great satisfaction, because that will fuel you on the days when it looks, as some of you have said, you know, like it's just not happening. And so I would just say, follow your heart and, you know, and stick with the things that really, really make a difference to you and give you joy.
Thank you, Dina. Oh, hold on. Yep. Dr. Bradley, what would you say? What's like one lesson learned in conducting research in aging?
Don't be afraid. All right, so don't let your ignorance, what you think is your ignorance, stop you. You'll never know everything. You'll never have your act completely together. Okay, people on the call, everyone but me, they all do, right? So, but don't let that stop you. And the reason that's my tidbit, because I think about the past during COVID, but the past 2.5 years, the research I've been doing with my colleagues in computer science and in information sciences and in technology, this is not the language I speak, right? I mean, I had to learn, I know a little bit about coding, nothing, right? Like ignorance. I was writing grant proposals on platforms I didn't know existed. So I like Word, you know, I like a basic, you know, document language, you know, and my colleagues use it. They could be speaking Turkish to me, like my daughter does, right? And yet I just was like, yeah, a test bed. I know what a test bed is. Okay, a test bed is not what I thought a test bed was. Think of test bed in this environment as like a theoretical construct that you're going to. So I was like, I kept literally thinking about the hospital bed that was being tested. No, right? Literal, no. But I am so grateful that I didn't go, I don't have the language. It's like, this is a different application of things I know very well. And it's okay. And that was, so when I say, do not be afraid when something comes your way, so that tickles your passion and your interest. So for me, it was very clear it was in that kind of caregiving, policy, family support, you know, lane. But the research partners have not been. And it's been one of the most rewarding times in my life because I didn't say no. So don't say no. If the passion, if the other things intersect, don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid. Don't say no. So Dr. Anderson, what would you say? What would you say is that one lesson learned?
Well, I don't know that I really have one. My mind doesn't work in this way. I know that. So with my clinical colleagues, they're always, milestones and professional activities and all these, everything's, they're much more organized in their thoughts, especially when it comes to like training and mentoring. So yeah, I would totally agree with Dana, being fearful doesn't help at all. And, you can weigh up each decision that you make. If I get involved, I mean, one thing I would say, look, there's only so many hours in the day, and you can't be wholly committed to A and B and C and have a family life and take care of, other aspects of your personal development. So, I mean, I know that it's not something that happens in the United States government these days, but there's a word called budget. And you have to budget your time. So if you want to commit to something, go all the way in, but then recognize that you may not also be able to keep maintaining these other smaller activities. So you make the decision, you weigh it up. And let's say, and this is why I think being fearless, but not being reckless would be the way that I would describe it. You weigh it up, and I would reiterate that point from before. There's nothing you do that can't be undone. You can try something out and you can say, look, this isn't really what I thought it was. I thought I was building this, but actually it's that. And you can pivot and you can move around. So this is the reason not to be fearful, that there's so much opportunity, there's so much diversity in the disciplines that we all work on, that there are ways to get things done. And I would also say, if the thing you're thinking about doesn't exist at all, then you might be the one who builds it. All of us look at these structures, we've seen them, there's the department of this, there's, the dean's office of this. These were all created by somebody at some point. And, to use the analogy, what I say to my students, undergraduates and graduate students, you read these things in a book and you think that they came from the sky and they are proven and shown, but somebody stood at a bench and did those experiments. Somebody made that discovery. Someone decided we should build the team this way. So these are all people who came before, or maybe are working in your department, who had a vision and implemented it. And there's no reason why you can't also have a vision and implement it. So I think I agree with the fearless. I would add in a little bit of don't be reckless, and then just weigh up that budget. Because it's one of the most important things, with the no, saying no or yes, no, say yes to yourself. Say no to other people. How about that?
Yeah, Dr. Jarrott. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Dr. Jarrott.
I think I can add on to what's been shared without entirely contradicting it. I do think it's okay to say no to other people, but I think the lesson I would share is that there's room at the table for everybody, and oh gosh, where did the rest of that go? We need each other. So it is about relationships that we can build within our disciplines and outside of our disciplines as well. I know that you've had some success in that regard, Christine, and that's where I've been able to pursue some success as well, is looking in places that aren't natural landing spots for gerontologists. Roz, I'll be in a session talking about geroscience next week, and I'm scared to death about what I'm going to share in that session. But you know what? They need to hear from the social science professional about the implications of trying to treat gerontology as a whole. We have so much to learn from each other, and there isn't just one right way to approach the work that we're interested in. It can be challenging. I think that's something I've learned over time to fight against, especially depending on the training you've had. The idea that a randomized clinical trial is the only way to gather the information that you need. And it has a very important role to play in our field. And it isn't always the first place to start or the best place to go to learn. I really learned that working in the community with those adult day services, staff and families and students and administrators who are like, hell no, you're not going to come in here and do that. I don't care if that's the gold standard of the method. We don't have time to put up with it. So when I say there's room for everybody at the table, that includes, and our colleagues have said it here, the staff members that we rely on, the older adults that we want to learn from, their families, etc.
This is great conversation. I'm monitoring the chat. Nobody's asked any questions per se, other than just like great feedback. Looks like we've got colleagues of ours that are applying for academic positions, research positions, so they needed to hear this. But I want to open it up at this point for anybody who's in attendance to unmute themselves and ask a question of any or all of our panelists. I do have a question that came in from Helen, I think, why I might be saying that wrong, at Stockton University, thanking us first for the information and wanting to know if there are any suggestions on funding resources or agencies available to support research on aging and technology, perhaps especially for smaller grants or pilot studies. Does anybody have any thoughts on?
So what is Heather? I don't know what stage you're at. Can you pop in if you're not, if you don't have to pop in. If you're comfortable popping in, it would be nice to see you. Oh, good. So I can tell you, so I'm on the NIA AGCD1, which is the career development, one of 4 career development award panels. And so depending on your career phase, if there's something that you want to do, there's huge interest in bringing technology to aging research. Already, obviously, in the biology of aging, we're swimming in technology, but bringing it into clinical, and I mean, I love what Dana said there, the idea of gathering information and conducting research outside of a clinical trial. So within a hospital setting, but through interactions in community-based or satellite clinic-based. And this is something we're really trying to encourage our medical students to think about. We have a module that I teach beyond the institution, that work can be done to understand better, the requirements of aging. So technology in that setting is super hot. And so depending on your career stage, there are a series of career development awards that are available through NIA. We're always crying out for people to come in through that, through those mechanisms. So the K Awards are for postdocs and early stage career faculty. And then we have also a number of aging or mid-career. Yeah, so then you can go for, there are grants for those also. There are also mechanisms for people who are kind of coming in, bringing in a new technology. So I can put you onto the program office, or you would go on to NIA and take a look there. There are other elements though, places like AFAR, the American Federation for Aging Research. If you have a neuro component, there's the McKnight Foundation. So there are a bunch of, different mechanisms that are available, especially if you're bringing in a new discipline or a new way of applying a technology. They'll be most eager to hear from you. So your best bet, I would say, is get in touch with NIA and start asking around in there. And it's double whammy good news, because then you get the information straight from where you need it, at least for federal programs, but then they also get to know you, which is a very important thing. Make that network to program office, and then take a look around with colleagues of yours. And this is where things like the peer network become so important, like attending meetings, friends at the poster sessions. People you meet at these conferences will be with you all the way through your career, and they'll be either collaborators with you, or they'll be reviewing your grants, they'll write papers with you, or they'll review your papers. But they'll also have a shared experience across the network. So ask people, okay, so you got funding recently. How are you managing this? What is the eligibility for this versus that type of award? So I'd go to the various agencies that have these awards, whether it's NIA or AFAR or whatever. If it's Alzheimer's connected, it's even more promising. And then also engage with your peer network. And I think that you'll be able to pick up some good tips. And then when you find a program, whether it's a pilot study, like the Nathan Shocks have all these pilot studies, but that's more biology of aging. But the older American independent centers all have pilot programs, and they're all looking to have funding, not just within their institution or multi-site, but outside of that. They all want people to be funding like as a hub outside. So go check those sites out. And then engage with your peer network. Hey, have any of you guys written a pilot program for the Pittsburgh OAIC, for example, and leverage that? But there are opportunities, and in many cases, certainly in NIA, there aren't enough people applying for these career development awards. We want people to come in, So yeah, I would take a look around there and use the network. It's something we want to actually put up on GSA, or links for people to be able to find out what's out there. And we've discussed it. So my other thing that I do is I'm just departing as the editor-in-chief for Journals of Gerontology. And we do get questions about career and stuff. And I really want that stuff on the GSA site, not handled through the journals, but we're working on it. And I'm in coordination with somebody now. It's Division of Aging Biology, not, you know, clinical or neuroscience, but we're trying to develop exactly that kind of information, put it on the GSA website. And then as people say, you know what, hey, I just got a grant from this one, we'll add it to the list and then get that out there. Because I mean, knowing the thing is there is step one. And then of course, you only get, you can't get a grant if you don't apply for it. So
Right.
Just go for it.
Some of the best advice. Thank you. Thank you for a great question. And Dr. Anderson, thank you for that. I don't know, I saw Dana unmuted, but I also see maybe Dr. Stearns wants to say something. David Burdick, thank you for David, had put in the chat that Dr. Stearns might have some experience with SBIR grants.
Sure, I'd be happy to comment on that. Many of the things that Dr. Anderson, many of the funding sources also have SBIR outlets, as small business innovation research. And what happens with the SBIR program is that must be a product, a service that you are designing. And so such funding can be used to both do applied and academic work. For instance, we have been involved in developing a therapeutic activity for people with Alzheimer's known as Memory Magic. It's now in about 3,000 facilities around the world. It started in our work with Cameron Camp, and this led to a series of building off well-established research, but then converting it into a greater application. And I think what's challenging about SBIRs, and there's also STTRs, which are where you can get a grant that along with an academic institution. So, but here again, getting an SBIR requires having appropriate background, having experience. I don't think it's a mechanism that's for the brand new. In fact, even for those who are highly experienced, it's a challenging situation. And
yeah,
I think,
go ahead.
you know, I've now had 51 years of experience, and I can tell you every grant is a challenge.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Stearns. You know, I also going to make a note, Dr. Jarrott put in there that some of these grants that Dr. Anderson also mentioned might be a nice opportunity to look across campus for interdisciplinary partners. There might be other opportunities with these grant mechanisms just to think about interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary teams to achieve the goals and objectives. I want to pick up a question that one of our attendees put, and this might be a question that could directly meet the need of any of our undergraduate students that might be on the call, but as well those of us that are early in our career, mid-careers, about thinking about research opportunities for undergraduate students, and that might be a way to provide a gateway to undergraduates to get them interested in aging or even graduate school. So I wonder from our panelists, how can undergraduates get involved in research to get excited about aging related research? How have you utilized undergraduate students? I'll just kind of leave it open. Go ahead, Dr.
So your best resource if you're on a university campus is probably that director of undergraduate scholarships. I mean, it has different names, right? But there is an office on most campuses that puts resources and money, you know, to get students to be ready for a Fulbright, for these international scholarship opportunities. So that's one, and those scholarship opportunities are almost always revolve around research in science, just research in general, right? So bench science, from bench science to social justice work. And I mention that because when you're looking for a student to work on your project, it's about thinking about something that's appropriate, like timestamp appropriate, right? They only have so much time in the day. Their skill set's very specific, and Sometimes the college you may be working in or your unit may have someone who's a particularly good mentor with undergraduate research. They've had that they published with them, but often the university can be really vested in those scholars, you know, first, second, third, fourth year scholars, non-doctoral students. And so tapping into that, I've worked in places with an honors college. And it didn't mean that you had to work with the honors students, but they had not only mechanism, but stipends with a way to top off money, to provide money for during the school year or during the summer, that I found very, very helpful. So I wanted to throw that out there, because they're, you know, undergrads become our graduate students. Someplace they become someone's graduate students.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah, and I see another question that kind of came in here. Any advice for gerontologists who are interested in a research career but have not earned a PhD, or maybe don't plan to earn a PhD? You know, are there previous experience or soft skills seem to be the most valued for this area? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I can say it depends on your discipline. You know, at the bench, it's possible. So people take these post-bac positions, often for a couple of years, and then they can roll out some of their accomplishments into a PhD subsequently if they choose to go there, or they can stay as what is called really a research specialist. So non-PhD, but scientist, trained in the lab, hands-on. So you don't have the degree, but you have the experience. And the thing is, absolutely, that's possible. There are many labs with people in those positions, but depends on how far you want to go for yourself personally. So if your long-term goal is to be engaged in research, then you might as well take the bull by the horns and figure out a way to get that PhD, because ultimately to petition for money, to run a program, to have people training with you, you're going to have it. But if you're just interested in doing the actual research, not leading a program, but contributing to the research, then, you know, you can still go on that track of postbaculate. But then generally people in that line have a very particular, they're like Liam Neeson, they have a particular set of skills. So it's important that you would make yourself competitive and, you know, stay on top of things. But I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to get a PhD. It could be, you know, in our discipline, you get paid to do it. So, you know, it's not, you know, buying racehorses or anything, but it's enough to make a living. So just take a look around and see what your medium term goals are. And if it's not good for you right now to do that, that's okay. Do a couple of years post-bac, get a feel for what area or discipline you want most to gain some skills in, and then consider when things are changed or your circumstances different, whether you might take on the PhD. But ultimately, if you want to be running a program and doing the lifting, getting the money in, developing new avenues, you would usually be expected to have the PhD. But you don't need it right away, and there's no sell-by date. You can get it when you're 50. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I see Dr. Jarrett's hand is up. Dr. Jarrott.
Yeah, I like that idea of things not expiring, and it may be the case that somebody appreciates the exploration of research and the variety of tasks and isn't necessarily looking to direct their own program or isn't sure if that's what they want to do. And in looking at the question there about soft skills, I think about how much time I spend managing personnel issues and managing budgets and managing projects and communicating. And so, for example, right now I'm trying to hire a project manager, and that person is going to do things that I, with the research PhD, would otherwise be doing because they're critical to the nature of the work. And then if they decide that that PhD is something that they'd like to do and they're a full-time or three-quarter university employee, maybe they're at a place that offers some tuition benefits that they don't have to pay for that full degree while they explore what they'd like to do next.
Great advice. Thank you. Any other questions in the chat, or anyone want to unmute and ask? If not, I know we're running to the top of our hour. Yeah, go ahead.
One suggestion about the research undergraduates. So most bench researchers have undergraduates in the lab, And in order to get into grad school these days, you have to, it makes an enormous difference to have had research experience during the undergraduate period. And I think one of the difficulties is getting that information out to people to know that this is a thing that you should do. It's not hard to do, and you can take it on, but if they don't know about it. So I think disseminating that information within your institution, if you're prepared to take an undergraduate in, we have undergraduates who are mentored by graduate students. Okay, so there's a whole layer of skill sets, and so as someone learns the new skill, then they train below, and everybody knows this. So everyone's part of this whole. It's like a machinery. It's really, really great. So each person learns from somebody, and they in turn teach the next person following. So check with your graduate school or your the school programs, see what's there. Ours has what's called a 152 research credit course that embeds students with labs. Otherwise, we can hire them in. They can either work for credit or work for money. Not huge money, but money nonetheless. So most institutions will have some sort of mechanism. And so I would start out with, curriculum development office and see, okay, what programs do you have? And then you can see if they can be reimbursed, but they can work for credit. And if they're dedicated and cool, it's an easy A. So they'll be interested in that. So I would encourage that. And the undergraduates are great. They take a lot of training, but they really bring a lot of joy to the lab. So I recommend you go find some and bring them into the fold.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. Undergraduate students have been part of the cornerstone of my research work here at CSU. So, we've just got about 7 minutes left, but I want to just check. I'm looking at everyone to see if anybody's got a hand up. If not, yeah, go ahead.
I'm curious if Joanne wants to share any more insight as to her question, because I know she has had some experience with students coming in, and I wonder if she's also interested in getting at positioning our students interested in aging in our field out in other departments.
Thanks, Shannon. I was just thinking about some other, virtual conversation I had been engaged in, where we were talking about how do we engage our undergraduate students in aging, because we know that's the hard spot. Once we have graduate students in aging, they've really already, taken their own lead, and they're excited. And what somebody suggested is that the way she's done it through all of her professional life is through research. That when students because many students want to do research, they don't necessarily care what it is, they just want to get engaged. And so she tries to engage as many undergraduates as she can. And once they do that and they interact with a variety of older adults and they interact with the issues, then they get really excited about aging research, and they can see themselves then moving on to adult development and aging and gerontology work. So that's kind of where it was coming from, about another way to think about the value of research in what we do.
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Jarrott, for reaching back out to Joanne there. This is great. Oh, there's another question that's come in. As someone who is about to enter the job market for both postdocs and assistant professor positions, what do you all remember about that time that helped you stand apart in applications? What a great question. Yeah. It's a great question.
I know I'm not going to be the one doing all the talking.
How about Dr. Waldrop? We haven't heard from you in a while.
I guess I have to go back to where I started from, which is that I taught in a very applied clinical program. We're teaching students how to be social workers. And I think that the strongest card that I had to play was both my interest in aging, because I was the only, no, that's not true. I was the second gerontologist to join the faculty. There was not a center on aging. They knew they needed gerontologists. But more than that, I had the required practice experience that would allow me to teach the courses that needed to be taught with clinical content. And so together, the experience in aging plus the now research knowledge I had from my PhD program was what I believe were my strongest two cards. And that doesn't apply to everyone's fields, But I think knowing the field and knowing what it is that schools are looking for, I hope that that's in some ways helpful.
Yeah, I do actually want to say one thing. You know, people undersell themselves when, especially, they're making that faculty jump. So one thing I think is extremely a helpful tip, or maybe hopefully you find it helpful. When you're applying for, you know, your program, you want to have your short, medium, and long-term vision. And you're asking for money from whatever institution it is to run that program. You're not asking for money for yourself. It's actually got very little to do with you other than it's your vision and you're running it. So don't be afraid to say, here's the program. What does the program need to succeed? And then the second thing I would say is often people underestimate what they bring to the table. So go to your more senior colleagues, show them their resume, and they'll say, oh my God, why have you got this in the first position and this is in the 5th position? And why are you not indicating the very pieces that are just your bells and whistles and they're buried in there, and also I did? So get some input from your, postdoc advisory committee, your tenure advisory committee, but also people that you've met at conferences that you think are aces and cool, and say, here, look, would you mind spending 10 minutes on my resume with me? And get the help to highlight, because you might be, sometimes people feel too self-conscious or something, and they're afraid, or they've just seen all the information and they can no longer see it. And that fresh eyes comes in and go, okay, look, this is what's separating you from everybody else. Highlight this, highlight that, and help you to phrase it in such a way that gives it full credit for what you've done instead of, a little bit buried. So ask as much as you need to build the program that is a program, not you. And then in getting your own thing together, seek advice from people who've handled a lot of these applications so that you can phrase without feeling boastful the attributes that you're bringing, because you have more than you think you have. That's always the fun part. You have more than you think you have.
Be
Go ahead, Dr. Bradley.
Be fearless, but not reckless.
Yeah.
I think that's the new thing. I want to say this is like my new. So I had a search firm come searching for me, and they rewrote my resume, my CV. I mean, they didn't rewrite it. They actually, yes, they did. They said, you have not been bragging about all these things. And it turned out I had done these, whatever the things were. And I'm like, well, that was just my job to do that. Like, that's just what I did. Like, doesn't everyone do that? And you all should be laughing at me, because it took exactly what Roz said, was this outside, and happened to be a search firm because it was, stuff. But like, you can see my publications. I can tell you what I've taught, number of students I've had. That's fine. That is not what gets me jobs or has gotten me jobs. It's these other things that I would never think to tell anyone. Right. And so having someone else, so in my case, it was a search firm, but I know, and we're hiring several positions, right? So I know what I'm looking for, and I expect that someone can teach, that they've published, that there's certain things I'm like, click, click, click. There's lots of people who can do that. That's not what makes you special. Tell me what makes you special.
Well, can I end there? Because we're like in our last 30 seconds. I think all of us, quite honestly, are special. We all have some interest in careers in aging and research careers in aging. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for taking an hour out of their time to be with us today. Excellent questions. It sounds like all of us are in various stages of our careers, and yet we can all learn from one another and be re-energized or energized to move forward. So with that, I just wholeheartedly want to thank our panelists. I want to thank the AGHE Advancement Working Group. I want to thank Gina Schoen at GSA for all the help to launching this first Careers in Aging panel. So thank you all. And I hope to see many of you, if not all of you, at GSA Annual Scientific Meeting next week. Bye-bye.